Angela Merkel is something like the King Arthur of politics. Now that she's retiring, it seems that the whole of Europe will be without direction. Can we really imagine a future without Merkel? Many of you watching this video may not even have political memories of what Europe was like before Merkel. We are talking about one of the longest serving democratic leaders in office, 16 years. During her career as German chancellor, Merkel has met 4 different US presidents. Within Germany, there is only one other politician who has lasted so long as chancellor, Helmut Kohl. But that's not all. Angela Merkel leaves office with an enviable popularity. An impressive 76% of Germans still trust her, despite having been in power for so long. And according to all the polls, she is the world's most highly rated leader in all other countries. In other words, no matter whether you like Angela Merkel or not, one thing is certain: our children are going to study her in their history textbooks. And the comparison seems obvious. Are we dealing with a new Margaret Thatcher? After all, both Merkel and Thatcher were the first women presidents of their respective countries. Both belonged to centre-right parties. Both won several elections, and both established themselves as great world leaders. The difference is that Thatcher always had more of a polarising profile. In the case of Merkel, we could say that everybody loves her. Everyone loves her, like a friend.
Social Democrats narrowly beat Angela Merkel's alliance in historic German election.
That's right. When Margaret Thatcher left power, the British people re-elected a candidate from her own party, the Conservative John Major. However, Merkel has not succeeded in getting her successor to win their elections again. It's not that Germans are entirely disappointed with her, but it seems that they've had enough of Christian democracy. In this video, we're going through Merkel's main highs and lows, what Merkel has done wrong, and where she's missed the mark. What is Angela Merkel's legacy? How will she be remembered? Today, we're going to answer these questions, but first, let's take a look at a bit of history.
Don't touch what's working.
To understand Merkel's political legacy, we have to understand the legacy left to her by the previous chancellor. We are talking about the Social Democrat, Gerhard Schröder. Yes, the name is probably going to sound familiar to many of you, especially to those of you who are veteran followers of VisualPolitik, because we have talked about him quite a lot on this channel, and usually not in a very positive light. Schröder was the Chancellor of Germany, and since then he has been working for the Russian gas company Gazprom. But let's be honest, even if Schröder is currently Putin's man in Europe, you have to admit that he was not a bad Chancellor of Germany. One of his great achievements was Agenda 2010, a kind of macro labour reform designed to get Germany out of the crisis in which it found itself. We're talking about the beginning of the 21st century. At that time, Germany was the lame duck of Europe. Unemployment was above 8%, so Schröder's labour reform included huge privatizations, flexibility of procedures, and all those things that typically make unions angry. And you know what? This time, it was no different. The opposition Schröder faced was so fierce that in 2005, he lost a no-confidence motion. Yes, that's right, the German labour reform cost Mr. Schröder his job. That's how, in 2005, Germany held early elections. And that's when the protagonist of this video comes into the picture.
Merkel becomes Germany's first woman chancellor.
So what happened as soon as Merkel came to power? Well, that whole package of labour reforms that the previous government had just approved, it started to take effect. You don't believe me? Well, just take a look at this graph. As you can see, the first year after the adoption of Agenda 2010, unemployment peaks. Think of it this way, reforms do not work immediately. But from 2005 onwards, unemployment started to fall. In other words, Schröder suffered the bad part of making unpopular policies, which is, they are unpopular. Merkel, however, reaped the reward, which is that they worked. But not only that, think about it. The German economy is one of the most diversified in the world. We've talked about it 1,000 times here on VisualPolitik. Germany has thousands of medium-sized companies that are leaders in their niche markets. We're not talking about famous companies, but for example, have you ever wondered who makes the soles on your shoes? Well, most probably, the rubber sole of your shoe is made by a company called Desma. Practically no one has heard of it, but in its niche, it is the world leader. Germany has thousands of cases like this. And that, combined with Schröder's labour policies, led to Germany surviving the financial crisis of 2008 better than anyone else. And who was governing Germany at that time? That's right, Angela Merkel. Of course, we don't want to take all the credit away from her. The fact that she did not mess with something that was already working is to be applauded, but we are not talking only about the economy. In fact, another of Merkel's big gambles was energy policy. You see, since the 1980s, Germany has been one of the most anti-nuclear countries in the world. In fact, Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, as a good leftist, wanted to close all nuclear reactors in the country. As you can imagine, Merkel, as a good right-winger, totally disagreed. Pay attention to what she said in 2009.
Merkel on defensive over nuclear power. Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, is campaigning to reverse the decision to phase out nuclear energy by 2021 if her favoured centre-right coalition option takes power.
However, that is what she was advocating in 2009. 2 years later, Japan suffered the Fukushima accident. And I know what many of you are thinking. What does Japan have to do with Germany? Well, if we go into the details, not much. But as you know, details, science, and data matter little in politics. By 2011, being pro-nuclear in Germany was totally unpopular. Check it out.
Hundreds of thousands protest against nuclear energy across Germany.
Yes, indeed. This is how Merkel went from defending nuclear power to announcing the shutdown of nuclear reactors as soon as possible. Today, Germany has shut down almost all of its reactors. As of today, only 6 remain. In this case, we're talking about a policy that has been very popular but has had catastrophic consequences. On the one hand, by abandoning nuclear power, Germany has had to burn more coal. Secondly, Germany has had to resort to natural gas from Russia. We have discussed all this in depth in other VisualPolitik videos, but broadly speaking, we could define Germany's energy policy as quiet populism. Yes, it's true. Merkel has always been honest and has never made grand, passionate speeches, but in many cases, she has let herself be guided more by opinion polls than by data. Fortunately for Merkel, the consequences of her energy policy will not be borne by her, but by her successor. Take a look.
German households face 11.5% rise in gas bills.
But that's a topic for another video. Now, let's focus on another fundamental aspect of Merkel, her role in international politics. Let's take a closer look.
The art of making agreements.
To understand Merkel well, we have to understand a very important concept: political capital. Political capital is the credibility that a leader has in front of his or her voters or in front of other leaders. This credibility can be invested to take more or less risky decisions or to persuade other politicians to reach agreements. Well, you could say that Angela Merkel is the Jeff Bezos of political capital. For example, we have the case of the 2011 Euro crisis. Do you remember that Germany was one of the countries that had come out of the financial crisis reasonably well off? To make a comparison, when Spain was exceeding 26% unemployment, Germany was at 2.4%. In those years, the countries of southern Europe were known as the Pigs. That's an acronym for Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. These 4 countries needed to finance themselves, but the markets demanded very high interest rates because investors were not confident that they could recover their debts. They had only one alternative: to ask for help from the European Union. And what was the largest economy in Europe, and which was also one of the best off? Germany. And who was the German chancellor at that time? Exactly.
Protesters rally as Merkel voices support for austerity hit Greece.
And that is how the legend of Merkel was born, the champion of austerity. And what does austerity mean? Well, basically, Merkel was willing to lend money to the countries of southern Europe at low interest rates. However, she demanded that those same countries commit themselves to pay it back. And in order to do so, they had to show that they were going to cut costs. As you can imagine, these were very unpopular measures. No politician wants to have to lay off civil servants. And that's how, almost overnight, all of us Europeans found ourselves with hundreds of caricatures of Merkel as this strict German who wants to force the poor Spaniards and Greeks to tighten their belts. And you're probably wondering, did the pigs really come to accept austerity? Well, on paper, yes. Now, in reality, there are a lot of interpretations to be made there. For example, Spain committed itself to making cuts, while simultaneously doing things like this.
Madrid 2020 presents its Olympic bid in Switzerland.
That's right. While Spain promised not to waste any more money, Madrid wanted to host the Olympic Games, which, as everyone knows, are anything but cheap. And games that, by the way, were going to be the 2020 Olympics, the ones that almost ruined Japan. Seems that Spain dodged a bullet there, actually. In any case, did Merkel really succeed in seducing southern Europe with austerity? Well, yes and no. Some countries like Portugal have followed Merkel's formula. Greece has implemented some cuts, but neither Spain nor Italy has embraced austerity. In other words, in the end, wealthy Europe ended up making a capital transfer with almost no strings attached. The question is, did Merkel make a good deal? Or could she have made more of her political capital? We'll leave that to personal opinion. But the truth is that this has not been the only major crisis led by Merkel. Listen up.
Number of refugees to Europe seeking asylum surges to record 1.3 million in 2015.
The war in Syria resulted in millions of refugees knocking on Europe's doors. And this is how one of the most intense debates in the European Union began. Can we accept so many people who come without work and with such a different culture? In this case, Merkel was clear.
Angela Merkel defends Germany accepting 10,000 UN refugees.
In this case, Merkel had to go up against all the easternmost countries of the European Union. But also within Germany, she encountered many sectors that were not in favour of accepting refugees. She was even criticised within her own party. Think about it. We are talking about thousands of refugees who need to be fed, given a house, and taught the language just so they can integrate. You know that here on VisualPolitik, we have always been in favour of immigration, but the refugee crisis does have so many nuances, and it is logical that many people were against it. It could be argued that Merkel's stance was the push the most nationalist German right needed to get into parliament. Since then, Alternative for Germany has become one of the most important parties in the country. Anyway, it must be acknowledged that, in this case, Merkel stood up for her principles and got many other countries in Europe to follow in her footsteps. The question is, was she really following her principles, or was she following the opinion polls? Well, we'll take a look at that right now.
Why Merkel is not Thatcher.
I know what many of you are thinking. We've been talking about Merkel for several minutes now, and we still haven't even talked about the coronavirus. Exactly. The crowning achievement of the Merkel administration has been its handling of the coronavirus pandemic. And why, you may ask? If you look at Germany's numbers, you will see that they are not particularly bad, but not particularly good either. There are many other countries like Taiwan or South Korea that have done much better. However, at a time when almost no European leader has measured up, Merkel seemed to be the only one who had a clear strategy. Not only that, she has also been one of the few cases of honesty that we've seen. When she has had to deliver bad news, she has not hesitated for a moment. All of this created an enviable personality and leadership style, and that is precisely the most remarkable thing about Merkel. Are you looking for a role model in your life? Imitate Merkel. The real question is, what was Merkel's great political project? And this is where it's inevitable that we enter into the realm of comparisons. I know that comparisons are odious and sometimes they are necessary, and now it's time to put Angela Merkel's profile next to that of Margaret Thatcher. The big difference is that Margaret Thatcher never had to govern in a coalition. During the 11 years of her administration, Thatcher had a free hand to decide on her own. Merkel, however, has never governed alone. First, she had to ally herself with the Social Democrats, then with the Social Democrats again. In other words, she has had to make many concessions. But the question remains, what principles does Merkel have? I mean, we can criticize many things about Thatcher's legacy, but we all know what her principles were, and she defended them to the end. In Merkel's case, it is almost impossible to understand what her political project was. For example, in 2015, Merkel was saying this about refugees.
If Europe fails on the question of refugees, then it won't be the Europe we wished for. Angela Merkel.
However, this is what Angela Merkel herself said just years before that.
Angela Merkel, German multiculturalism has utterly failed.
I know what many of you will say. Everyone has the right to change their mind. That is true. The question is, are we talking about a change of opinion or an attempt to please the voters? We find something similar with her energy policy. When Merkel was running in her first election, her party advocated keeping nuclear power plants. It only took a few demonstrations and opinion polls for Merkel to announce the closure of all reactors from one day to the next. And we are not talking about a minor issue. Without nuclear power, Germany has had to rely even more on natural gas. And as you know if you follow VisualPolitik, almost all of that natural gas comes from Russia. What's more, do you remember Gerhard Schröder? We said that you can't understand Merkel without understanding Schröder. And the truth is that the careers of these two politicians have always gone hand in hand. Because just now, in 2021, the interests of Schröder, who works for Gazprom, and those of Merkel have come together once again.
Gazprom announces that its Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline to Germany is finished.
I doubt very much that Ukrainians are very fond of Merkel. Quite the opposite. Nord Stream 2 has made Germany and the whole of Europe even more dependent on Russia. And all because of an energy policy that was not backed by any scientific data, only political and parliamentary arithmetic. In other words, we cannot deny that Merkel has had the charisma and an ability to adapt to events worthy of applause. But has she really had a clear political project? That is more debatable. But now the question is over to you. How do you think we will remember Merkel? What lessons should the politicians who are still active learn from this leader? You can leave me your answers in the comments. And as always, don't forget that here on VisualPolitik, we release new videos every week. So subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell icon so you don't miss any of our updates. If you like these videos, then of course, like it, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. See you soon.